Morning has come, arise and greet the day. Dance with joy and sing a song of gladness. The light of hope here shines upon each face. May it bring faith to guide our journey home.
Morning has come, arise and greet the day. Dance with joy and sing a song of gladness. The light of hope here shines upon each face. May it bring faith to guide our journey home. A new day dawns, once more the gift is here. Wonder fills this moment shared together. The light of peace here shines upon each face. May it bring faith to guide our journey home.
Good morning and welcome to Live Oak Unitarian Universalist Church. I'm Reverend Joanna and I'm the senior minister here, and I am so glad that you could join us. If this is your first time with us, a special welcome goes out to you. Be sure to look at our website, liveoakuu.org, and on that front page you're going to see a link where you can sign up for our newsletter, and I'd encourage you to do that. We are staying very busy, even with being all online. In fact, I think we may be doing more things now than we were before. And so click on that newsletter. It'll be sent to your email address once a week, and you may find some activities and events that would interest you. We are an intergenerational church, and so we invite you to bring your children to participate in the service. And worship is a participatory event. For all of our members, welcome. This is our first time of doing worship on the YouTube Premier platform. I think that you're going to find a lot of it's pretty similar to the way we did worship on Zoom. Now you can turn on closed captioning. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a CC there. If you click on that, that'll turn on the closed captioning if you'd like that. With chat, you can turn the chat completely off. But I also hope that at least during the parts of the service where we ask questions or invite you to be a part of the ritual, I hope that you'll engage with that, because ultimately, worship is not something that we watch. It is something that we do. It is something that we participate in. And so when you participate, you make this a more full worship service for everyone. After the service, we're going to have another way for you to participate. We will put a link into chat, and you can also find the link if you go to liveoakuu.org. You'll see something that talks about fellowship time, and there will be a link that does go to a Zoom room where we can see each other's faces. And so we get together after the service. We see all of each other's faces, and then we break into smaller groups so that we can do deeper check-ins with smaller groups of people. Then we all come back out into the big group to see each other once again. And I hope you can participate in that. And now, if you have a chalice near you or a candle, if you would draw it toward you so that we may all light our individual chalices together.
this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. I know this rose will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open.
This morning's story is from my colleague, Joy Berry, as told at Laredo Fall Con 2017. It's titled, Let Go and Let Goo. Transformation, metamorphosis, revision, adaptation. There are so many words for change. But most of the time, we'd rather talk about it than do it, wouldn't we? I mean, that's because change is always to some degree hard. And there's something deeply and essentially alone about the experience of change. Even if we are in a relationship to a community that is changing, there is no getting around the discomfort and anxiety that we feel when big changes are in process. Even if we believe, as I heard a colleague say yesterday, that if we can learn to sit in discomfort, we can move toward the liberation that is ultimately on the far side of change. Faith is not easy to come by in these moments when change threatens our sense of security, identity, our competence, and our confidence. It's hard to have trust that change will come, that it won't destroy us, that change will be good. But some creatures are more trusting, more adaptable than others. We mostly struggle and muddle and resist through transitions and transformations, while others, like the caterpillar, are born to a life of big changes. They spend their whole lives on the edge of glory, always in the process of a miraculous change. When a caterpillar starts life, it's a little egg on a leaf. It hatches out and starts eating. Do you know the story of the very hungry caterpillar? And it eats and it eats and it eats, and it grows and it grows and it grows, and soon it is a big caterpillar. Now, when we grow bigger, do we get too big for our skin? No, it grows right along with us. But not so with a caterpillar. Soon it is too big for its skin, and it wriggles right out of that old one that got too tight, like a shirt from when you were really little that you might try to wear now that you're bigger. It wriggles out of its too tight skin, and it has a new, bigger skin underneath that looks just the same as the old one. This is called molting, and a caterpillar does it 4 or 5 times in its life. It eats and it grows and it splits its outer skin right down the back, and it doesn't even hurt when it crawls out, dressed in a new skin that fits it much better. Finally, the caterpillar attaches itself to a twig or a stick and hangs upside down and gets ready to shed its skin one more time. This time, the skin underneath looks different. This is a chrysalis, and it is what the caterpillar was wearing underneath all those skins it grew out of. Sometimes it's green like this, but it can come in many colors. At first, it's soft, like the caterpillar was. But as the caterpillar hangs in the chrysalis, it begins to change, and we call it a pupa. The chrysalis gets harder and harder, to protect the pupa while it changes one final time. And it's then that everything gets dark. There is so much amazing and miraculous stuff happening inside a hard little chrysalis or pupa, but you'd never know it from the outside. The caterpillar is changing into a completely different kind of creature. That kind of change is called a metamorphosis or transformation. And to understand how it can happen, we have to pull the caterpillar back out and realize that when the baby caterpillar egg was laid on a leaf by its mother, it already carried with it in every cell of its body the DNA or blueprint or recipe for two completely different kinds of bodies. Most of its life it spends as a caterpillar and doesn't need to know how to be any other kind of creature. But during metamorphosis, it has to change. And it starts using that special code. Inside every chrysalis, if it's lucky, a caterpillar's whole body is turning into a kind of goo and breaking down everything about it that was once a caterpillar. Something called imaginal cells, which can turn into anything a creature needs, are changing into body parts the caterpillar never had and never needed. Like what? Wings. Can you imagine hanging upside down by a thread inside a tiny chrysalis, unable to move, feeling your entire body go still, and then break down and change into something completely different? A caterpillar doesn't know what's happening to it, doesn't know it's changing into a butterfly, doesn't know it's growing wings, doesn't know it will fly or have beautiful, colorful patterns. If it knows anything at all, it is just that it is time to let go. Sometimes people talk about change and they say that it is very hard to trust and just let changes happen. Sometimes people say, let go and let God, if they believe that God is in charge and everything is going to be okay if we will stop worrying so much. If caterpillars talked to each other about their change, they might say instead, let go and let goo. Because that's what is happening. The whole caterpillar body turns into mush and then puts itself back together again, builds a brand new body out of goop and a blueprint locked like a code in every cell of the creature. Every caterpillar, if it's lucky, grows up and transforms into a butterfly. We usually focus on the butterfly that emerges, but the real magic is in the goo, and it's the hardest part. Human beings, unlike animals and plants, often find transformation hard. But change is happening all the time. And even when we feel paralyzed, like we can't move, like we are in a puddle of goo and can't lift a finger to control what's happening, the ability to believe that something amazing is happening inside of us or around us, something that is changing us or the world, is a special kind of magic. In caterpillars, it takes imaginal cells, and in people, it takes a special kind of powerful imagination. Some people call it hope, some call it trust, some people call it faith. Whatever you call it, there's no denying that somehow there's an amazing plan that lets a worm grow wings. So anything can happen if we're willing to let go and let the disrupting discomfort of change work on us. We too carry the blueprint for our future in our human and theological DNA. Jessica York said, "It is so hard for us to break habits. It's important to look for ways to disrupt old patterns. So the discomfort of change, as hard as it is, as uncomfortable as it is an opportunity." We are all supposed to be in formation. Sometimes that means reformation, where reformation happens. Christina Rivera said, "Shared liberation is what's waiting for us on the other side of change." And I have faith that that's true. Unlike the caterpillar and its chrysalis, we are in this together, in solidarity, sharing the deep code and blueprint that helps us all remember and grow toward the promise of what we and this faith could be. The words of my wise colleague, Joy Berry.
The Legend of John Henry is my favorite bedtime story that I remember my mother reading to me. I hope you enjoy the musical interpretation I have of the song that tells that story.
When John Henry was a little baby boy, he was sitting on his pappy's knee. He picked up a hammer and a little piece of steel. Said, this hammer's gonna be the death of me, Lord, Lord. Hammer's gonna be the death of me. The captain, he said to John Henry, we're gonna bring that steam drill round. We'll take that steam drill out on the job. Let it whip that steel on down, Lord, Lord. It's gonna whip that steel on down. Well, John Henry, he said to his captain, a man ain't nothing but a man. But before any steam drill ever beats me down, I'll die with this hammer in my hand, Lord, Lord. Gonna die with this hammer in my hand. The C&O Railroad, they brought that steam drill down. They sure thought it was mighty fine. But John Henry, he drove 15 feet, while that steam drill, it only made 9, Lord, Lord. That steam drill only drove 9. John Henry hammered his way through the mountains. His hammer was striking up fire. But he worked so hard, he broke his poor heart. And he laid down his hammer and he died, Lord, Lord. He laid down his hammer and he died.
Nature has taught me about fluid adaptability, about not only weathering storms, but using howling winds to spread seeds wide, torrential rains to nurture roots so they can grow deeper and stronger. Nature has taught me that a storm can be used to clear out branches that are dying, to let go of that which was keeping us from growing in new directions. These are lessons we need for organizing. As Octavia taught us, the only lasting truth is change. We will face social and political storms we could not even imagine. The question becomes not just how do we survive them, but how do we prepare so when we do suddenly find ourselves in the midst of an unexpected onslaught, we can capture the potential, the possibilities inherent in the chaos, and ride it like dawn skimming the horizon. Creating a program that can adapt to changing circumstances has long been the achievable holy grail of computer science. Lucky us, though, we were born with that programming already a part of us. This is one of the really interesting things about nature, is that most living things have an ability to adapt in order to survive. And many of these adaptations are nothing short of miraculous. Take, for instance, the Arctic woolly bear caterpillar. So this caterpillar, up in the Arctic, of course, there's very little spring or summer. But during that one bit of warmth that it gets, it's eating as fast as it can so that it will be able to spin a cocoon and become a moth. However, up in the Arctic, there's often not enough time for it to get enough energy into its body. And so it just hunkers down for the winter. But see, here's what the really interesting part of this. The caterpillar actually freezes solid, sometimes up to negative 70 degrees below 0 Celsius. It freezes solid, but then when the spring, the summer comes around again, it thaws out. It effectively comes back to life. Not that it ever fully died. It has chemicals in its blood so that even though it has frozen solid, it still remains alive. Some adaptations happen like that. They happen over hundreds of years through evolution. But we also, as living beings, have the ability to adapt to changing circumstances just over our lifetimes. We're seeing a lot of that right now, right? We have adapted in a very short time to some rather strange circumstances with this global pandemic. And not only do individuals adapt, but the systems that support those individuals, the systems that are made up of those individuals also adapt. We're seeing it right here at Live Oak with the way that we have adapted to these circumstances. And I've said this before, if they wanted to create a virus that would most impact a church, they pretty much did. And so we're having to find new ways to do worship and to do community, even to do social justice. At Live Oak, for several years now, we've talked about the ability to be nimble as a church and to adapt to changing circumstances. I don't think any of us had any idea that this was the kind of circumstance we were going to adapt to, but I feel really lucky because this was already part of our culture. This was already part of our church nature to be able to change and adapt and experiment. And if something didn't work, shrug our shoulders and say, okay, let's try something else. But adapting is not always good. If an adaptation that we have taken on, if we continue to do it past when we needed it, it can be harmful. If you grew up in a dysfunctional family, there may have been ways that you adapted in order to survive that. But without really thinking through what those adaptations were, those same things that you did to survive could be the very things that harm your relationships and your life as an adult. The harder that the world makes it for an individual to survive, the more the individual has to adapt. And sometimes the cost for that adaptation can be very high. One example of this is what is called Henry Ism. The term was coined by a young research professor, Dr. Sherman James. He took the term not only from the folk song that many of us know about the man who was going to die with a hammer in his hand, but also for a real life person. He met a man named John Henry Martin. And Mr. Martin, as a young man, was a sharecropper, and he was black. So he was constantly dealing both with being taken advantage of, which is what happens in sharecropping, and with the daily racism of being a black man. And but he worked really hard to adapt to the world that he was living in, and to not only survive but to become a success. And he worked so hard that by the time he was 40 years old, he owned his own land. He owned 75 acres. But by the time he was 50, this was taking a physical toll on him. He had numerous physical issues, including high blood pressure and arthritis. He had to get part of his stomach removed. And so Dr. James was able to look at the adaptations he had had to make in his life of working extra hard. It's often said for those who come from marginalized communities that they have to work twice as hard in order to be treated with half of the respect, and that takes a toll. Right now, with the coronavirus, we know that it is affecting the Black community more than it is any other. And people theorize about the different reasons that that could be. But I haven't heard anyone talk about this particular issue. And I'm not a science researcher. I'm not a physician. But I really wish someone could look into this, because I am willing to bet that if you looked at this whole issue of John Henryism, of having to deal with the day-to-day stresses of racism and having to prove yourself and working extra hard, harder than other people have to in order to have success, I imagine there's a good chance that that winds up being a comorbidity with coronavirus. Racism, oppression is deadly, and the threat of it comes in many forms. And so all of us are called to do the hard work of working toward racial equity, working against all of the systemic oppressions that are in place and have been in place for so long, so that people do not have to do these adaptations that come at such a high price. And we each need to think and be mindful about what are the adaptations that we are choosing. To have the ability to adapt is wonderful, and it's going to help us to survive whatever things come our way. But we need to be mindful and deliberate about the ways that we are choosing to adapt. Are we choosing things that are going to help us in the future, or are we just so focused on trying to get through each day that we're not really thinking about the costs that are involved? Now, a lot of the times, to adapt is not comfortable. Think about that caterpillar that is dissolving into goo in order to become a butterfly. Just look at what our lives are like right now. Even in mundane ways, to adapt is to be uncomfortable. I think that our society right now is in the chrysalis. We're dissolving some old ways of doing and being, and hopefully at the end of this it's going to mean, okay, it sounds corny to say we will become butterflies, but hopefully there's going to be something positive at the end of this. Some of the adaptations that we have done in the past, we may want to re-examine those. In the case of John Henryism, the very elements that we lift up as being part of our American values, hard work and self-reliance and independence, all of those can come at a cost and at a physical toll. Our goal should not just be to survive, but also to thrive. What are things that we're going to want to do different? That right now, while we are all dissolving in the goo of this global pandemic, that we can be thinking about how to have better lives and how to create a better world. I'm hopeful that right now we are doing some hard work to dissolve some of the structural oppressions that have been in place, so that we can have that better world and individuals can have those better lives. But it's not comfortable. There is tremendous discomfort in adapting and changing to new ways of being. It is an amazing thing to have been born with the ability to adapt. And if you feel like maybe that's not something that comes really naturally to you, it's also a kind of programming that we can all get better at. Adapting means listening and learning and being willing to change when we get new information and when we have new insights. Adapting is our superpower. How are you going to use yours?
Just as long as I have breath, I must answer yes to life. Though with pain I made my way,
Thank you for joining us this morning. A special thank you to everyone who helped us create this worship service, the people who provided your talents for producing and creating music and being a verger. All of that is so appreciated. It really does take a village to make a worship service, and it takes a village to make a village. And that's what we are. We are an intentional, intergenerational village, and we have so many people who make that possible. Thank you, and thank you for being here. We are, as I mentioned before, busy 6 to 7 days a week, and so I encourage you to check out our newsletter and to check out our What's Happening page. We put that out every week because sometimes the days start to run together, and so it can be good to see at a glance what is happening with Live Oak every day. And now I invite you, after our chalice extinguishing, to join us for some fellowship time so that we can see each other's faces and get caught up on the details of our lives. May you go forward, knowing that you are lovable and loved, that life is fragile and a gift, and you are not alone.
I got to tell you something important. You need to know. You're gonna be fine. They said the walls were there for protection. That used to be true. It's time to break through. Butterfly, you can try your bright wings. Let your colors fly. The chrysalis really is a fine thing till it's time to take the sky. It feels like it's all falling apart. What's happening is unfurling. Where do you migrate? How do you get there? When it's time to go. You'll know. Butterfly, you can try your bright wings. Let your colors fly. A chrysalis really is a fine thing till it's time to take the sky. Wishing you honey, wishing you